Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about what I will call real rippling. You've probably heard the term ripple or ripple edit mentioned in REAPER and other applications. Cohler Classical is the only application that does real, complete ripple editing. What do I mean by that? Rather than get into every single case that is not handled in REAPER or in Pyramix or in Sequoia or in the other applications, I'll show you all the things that Cohler Classical does with regard to rippling. Many of these are not available in each of those applications. For starters, rippling means when you make an edit, it propagates whatever changes in length you made to the audio downline, and if you made the change upline, it propagates them upline. So, for example, a simple example of that is, let's say I do a quick source destination edit and I grab this piece of audio from source group 1, that fairly long piece of audio, and I decide to replace this short piece of audio here in the destination. It's going to make this item longer with 2 edits there, which should push everything to the right. So we do that edit, and you can see everything gets pushed to the right. If I undo the edit, it comes back to the left. Redo the edit, gets pushed to the right. Okay? So that is an example of a ripple edit. Now, that rippled all the items and all the edits, but much more than that in Cohler Classical. It also rippled any markers that might have been there and any automation points. So now I'll put a marker in so you can see that. So I'll put a marker right here, right next to this big waveform. Now when I do that same edit again, you see how the marker also moved and is in the same place relative to the waveform. Undo the edit, redo the edit, and you see the marker move. So it's not only rippling all the edits, all the crossfades, it's rippling the markers as well. If there were 50 markers down there, they would all ripple so they would stay in sync with the audio. Then we have the issue of automation points. So I'm going to toggle open the automation tracks here, and you can see these points are on envelopes. So see this point here, for example. I'll put a marker right on that point to make it easier to see when it moves, okay? So I'm going to put a marker, it'll be marker number 2. It's sitting right on that envelope point. So now we're going to do the source destination edit again, and we're going to watch that move as well. So you see marker number 2 is still on that point. And all the automation points to the right of where I did the edit, they all moved. So these points here moved, these points here moved. I'll undo it. You see, and they move back to the left, all these points. Redo it. They all move to the right. Now, some of these automation points are on media tracks. So like these automation points here are on the solo violin track. Other automation points, like these ones here, are on the piano folder track. So this is rippling not only automation points that are on media item tracks, it's rippling things on folder tracks as long as they're in the same group. The other important thing about this is only rippling within the track group. REAPER has a concept of rippling per track or all tracks, both of which are useless in classical music, because in classical music we need to be rippling track groups, including all the tracks, both folder and media tracks, in the track group, but not rippling or changing anything in the non-activated track groups. That's what Cohler Classical does. So when I do these edits, everything is rippling automation points, markers, edits. Now let's go a little bit more complicated. Another case where we need rippling is if we change the rate of the audio. If I click on this item here, right now that's playing back at the normal rate. If I were to change that to playback 20% faster, that would make the audio in that item 20% shorter. Now, if you did that using a plain REAPER command, it would simply squish this waveform to the left, but it wouldn't update anything. REAPER doesn't know how to ripple that at all. So it would look like this. If I just do, I'll right-click, I'll use a raw REAPER command. If I go into Item Properties, and I go into Playback Rate here, and I set it to 1.2, and we click Apply, you see this waveform just got 20% smaller, but nothing rippled. No markers rippled, nothing rippled. I'll undo it and redo it so you can see it. I'll close this and then undo. Undo, waveform goes to the right. Redo, waveform goes to the left, but nothing ripples. Undo. And by the way, when you do the command, when I redo it, you can see in the lower left corner R:1.2, meaning this is now playback rate of 1.2. In classical music editing, that's useless. What we need is when the rate is changed, we need everything to ripple. Again, all the markers, all the edits, and all the automation points. This is actually quite complicated. But in Cohler Classical, it's one click. You go to the Edit menu, you go to Other Edits, Rate. We want it 20% faster, let's say. We would never do that big a change in real classical music, but just for visual purposes, 20% faster. We click OK. Now watch what happens to all the marks, all the waveforms, all the edits, and all the automation points. Everything moved. Notice marker 1 is still at the beginning of that waveform. Notice marker 2 is still sitting exactly on that automation point. Notice that all these automation points move to the left with the audio. So in other words, the automation is still in the correct place relative to the audio. If you don't ripple all automation points, the change is useless because now your automation's all in the wrong place. So I'll undo that and redo it a few times so you can see it. So undo, and you see it all went to the right. Redo, all goes to the left. Now, it's actually even more complicated than you think because these markers, 2 and 1 here, will go to the right by the same amount because they're outside of this item. The points in automation that are inside this item move varying amounts of distance depending on their distance from the left edge. So the points that are further in move further to the left. The points that are closer in move less, so that the size of all these things changes by 20%. I'll show you once more. We'll undo it, and then we redo it. So you can see everything is rippling exactly within the track group, within the automation points, all the markers, and all the edits. Now, let's look at one other thing that's very important. Again, that REAPER doesn't handle correctly, but with Cohler Classical it all works automatically. If I'm editing a particular edit, so if I'm editing this edit here, I'll type F here to go into edit mode. And I'm going to zoom out far enough so that we can see the automation points. There we are. If I select the right side of this and I start to drag the right side, you'll notice automation points are moving with it. If I move it back, they're moving back. And if I zoom out further, you can see actually everything moving. As I drag the right side, the markers move, the edits move, the automation points move. Drag it back, moves back. Now, if I do that on the left side, let me zoom in here so I can grab the left side. That's a small space here. Grab the left side here. It's going to do the same thing, but upline instead of downline. So let me create a couple of markers here so you can see that the markers move. And you see some automation points over here. And as I drag this to the left, markers move to the left, these points move to the left. As I drag this to the right, they move to the right. And you'll notice it happens on all tracks, whether or not they're showing, by the way. So in other words, even if I close up the automation tracks here, I can still do these edits, and everything is moving with it, whether or not it's showing. I can open up all the media tracks if you want to see it all move. You can see all the items, all the markers, all the edit points. So this is critical because when you're editing classical music, you have an entire piece, or in some cases an entire CD, and as you put it together, you need to be able to make these changes. Occasionally you say, well, this is good, but they're a little bit too slow here, so I need to increase the rate, or I need to adjust the edit, or I need to paste in half a measure where the tempo was slightly different, etc., etc. And you need to always keep all of your upline and downline edits perfectly synced. So Cohler Classical's innate capability of always rippling everything in the track group, all the automation points, all the edits, and all of the markers, upline and downline, automatically, seamlessly, with no extra setup or clicks or sorting or anything, is completely unique in the industry. That's why I call it real rippling. And like everything else in Cohler Classical, everything you need to do is just one click away.